I'd like to call the Town Council regular session in order. The time is 7:05, and it is Wednesday, April 11th. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we have the roll call, please, Dale? Present.
Here.
Here.
Thank you, Dale. I would just like to ask everyone in our audience if they could just silence their phones. We have a policy here at the table, some ground rules that will be not texting in town chambers. So if you need to use your cell phones, please feel free to use the hallway out here. Thank you. This is a time for the Town Council and the School Committee to come together, look at the budget. We have been in budget preparation since March 1st, and this is the time for the public to be heard, as well as some dialogue between the Town Council and the School Committee. And at this point, I'm going to ask if Ms. Maureen Cotter would like to say anything.
Well, I just want to make a note of certain people that aren't here. Kevin Jackson, his grandmother passed away. And Scott teaches a class on Wednesday evening, so he'll be here as soon as he can get here.
Thank you. At this time, before we begin, any further information from School Committee or Town Council? At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alfred.
If everybody has a copy of the handout that's available as far as the overall budget is concerned, this is really a process that we go through each year. The council adopted the preliminary town council budget on March 19th. That budget is contained within the handout. On the first page is a summary of what we anticipate to be the property tax effort that will be required and the levy. Looking at the chart, the appropriation is shown at $73,336,412 for the 2012-13 year. That's a $35,638 reduction from the current year's general fund. Next line item, however, we're showing $8.1 million in non-property tax revenues. That's down approximately $325,000. So overall, the property tax needs up $290,000. When we look at the overlay, we've tempered that down from 1.4 in the current year to 1.3. So it's down about $33,000 from what it had been. So the net effect is that the gross increase in property tax required to fund the council's preliminary budget would be about $256,000. We're anticipating at this point about a $12 million increase in the value of motor vehicles. With that type of an increase, we'd see about $230,000 in new property taxes generated through that excise tax, which means that the remaining $25,000 would need to come from the real estate tax. This way, we would allow a zero tax rate increase for the 12-13 year. There are still some unknowns. The first that I want to mention is on motor vehicles. As I noted in the budget message, and there still hasn't been resolution, there are bills that have been introduced at the General Assembly that would restructure the value of the taxable value associated with motor vehicles. It could see a decrease as much as 20% in the value. Were that to occur, it would reduce the amount of taxes that would be generated through the motor vehicle tax by about $680,000. That doesn't mean that that tax would disappear. It would mean that it would become new tax requirements within the real estate. and would add about 16 cents to the tax rate of $14.51. At this point, we have no idea when the General Assembly will act in terms of dealing with the motor vehicles. There's several bills that are there. One would take the existing clean price per vehicle and take it to a resale price. That could mean as much as a 20% reduction. That's why I'm calculating that we would end up having to transfer $680,000 of that into the real estate roll if that were to occur. If somebody owned multiple vehicles, it would be good news for them because they'd pay less. If somebody owned no vehicles, their real estate would be higher. You're not changing the tax levy, you're changing the source of where the tax is coming from. So that's one of the issues that's still outstanding. There's also been a bill introduced in both chambers that would require a 50% reduction in the fees charged for building permits for the 12-13 year. If that were to occur, the revenues that are included in the general fund would potentially be reduced by about $155,000. That bill also would call for a moratorium on the collection of impact fees. Impact fees are in the amount of $191,000 are included in the 12-13 budget. So those are still outstanding issues that would need to be addressed and hopefully will be addressed within the Assembly prior to the Council's final adoption of the budget, which is scheduled for, what's the date, Dale? April 30th. For April 30th. So we're hopeful to have resolution on those items, but there is impacts that each of those could have. Are there adjustments that we would have to make? Yes, there are, because we need to have a balanced budget. But at this point, based on the best information that's available, we're looking at a tax levy increase of approximately 0.39%, or $256,000. If you go to page 2, the top bracket is a look at the 8 different municipal funds that are used by the town for budget purposes. Those 8 funds are identified as the general, school, the utilities for water, wastewater, solid waste. We also have special revenue funds associated with Peacedale Office Building, the Neighborhood Guild, and the Senior Services Program. When we add all of those programs together, we're looking at an overall budget requirement of $89,458,000. That would be the municipal programs for the 2012-2013 year. What we're doing is we're reversing out interfund transfers because the $48 million that's roughly in the general fund that goes to the schools is also in the school fund, so you can't add those twice. The same thing with any transfers from the general fund to the senior services program, those would have to be taken out, and that's why you've got the $48.7 million being subtracted to come up with the net budget. So the effective dollars that are needing to come in and go out are approximately $90 million next year, which is about a $316,000 reduction from what the current year 8 programs net cost would be. The next bracketed area is the summary of the general fund. The general fund that went through the public budget sessions on January 5th, 6th, 7th was $7,500 less than the budget adopted by the council. The council had 3 revisions that they made on March 19th. One was to increase the line item from $0 to $7,000 for transfer and contribution to the Chamber of Commerce. The second was an increase in the Washington County Regional Planning from $2,500 to $3,000 for a total increase in expenditure requirements of $7,500. When that occurred, to be able to balance the budget, the council also adopted a revision in its revenue statement which increased the payment in lieu of taxes by $7,500 to offset the expenditure increases. That $7,500 was identified as new income from the pilot program that would come through the Bayberry Court housing development, which is near the Public Safety Building. That is a facility that is exempt from taxes, but pays a payment in lieu of taxes equal to 8% of what their gross rental income is. That hadn't been budgeted when the manager's budget was prepared. It was available for amendment in the council's budget and allowed us to balance out the programs. As I go through each of the funds, if there are questions from the floor, council, or from the school committee, I would ask that those questions go through the chair. If anybody has a question from the floor, please go to the podium and be recognized by the council president, and then we'll try to address those questions as we go along. The general fund at this point, as I mentioned earlier, is at the $73,336,412 dollar amount with no property tax rate increase anticipated at this time. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the school fund. The school fund is recommended in the amount of $58,250,400. That is a reduction of approximately $184,145 from what was budgeted in the current year. When we look at the revenue statement within the school fund, the revenue from the state aid and federal programs is down $314,432. We did change, after I reviewed the school committee's proposed budget, and it was reviewed by the finance director and I, we did recommend several changes. The changes that were recommended and adopted by the school committee included, one, an increase of $39,500 in the outside tuition account. This was assuming that we would see one additional child that would be in our school program from an outside community that would be paying that in income, and that is where we had those students in place in the current year. We also recommended to the school department a revision of $560,196 in expenditure reductions. Of those expenditure reductions, we identified 23 specific accounts. We can go through any of those. Those accounts had no impact on the programs being proposed by the school department. What they were adjustments based on what expenditure patterns over the past 3 years showed by line item account that where adjustments could be made down. There was also 2 accounts that we recommended reductions, one in the amount of $60,000 from the capital budget. There was $135,000 that had been budgeted for 12-13 year for the rehab of Curtis Corner track. What we suggested be done is that be cut to $75,000, with $60,000 coming out of the current year, and having that program start before the end of the fiscal year 2011-12, so that project could be completed in advance of school opening in September. Those dollars would come through the 11-12 budget, which school department is documenting a projected surplus at this point. We also recommended a similar item. There was a key access system for the high school in the amount of $50,000 that had been proposed to be incorporated into the school's 12-13 year. We suggested that money be used out of the 11-12 year as a means of reducing that $125,000. So all told, the reductions that were made that were specifically based on cost accounting amounted to $435,196. The $125,000 was still allowed to be spent, but it was to be front-loaded out of the 11-12 year. The overall property tax increase being transferred to the school department is $147,823, and I think it's a 0.7% increase over what the current year is. Having given that as an introduction on the school fund, I would ask if the superintendent or members of the school committee would like to comment on the school fund as presented.
Jim?
Steve or John, of the $34,255,000 in salaries, how much of that is the increase in the steps?
I don't have the exact step number with me, but it was 200 and some odd thousand in steps. I think about 250, 260,000 is my recollection.
All right, and in that number, does that include the 2 specialists that you want to hire, or is that?
In the overall salary number?
Yes.
They are included.
Okay, do you know what can you give me the salary part of that 250,000?
The total for the 2 positions was a little over 200,000.
Okay, does that include
Salary
health care and
benefits.
pensions too, or is
Yeah.
that just salary?
Total salary and benefits.
A little over 200?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Any questions from the audience at this time? Back to you, Steve.
Okay, if we move on to,
Oh, we have one. Welcome. If you could just state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Rebecca Galoob. I'm a resident of South Kingstown, a teacher at the high school.
Pull it down a little.
Okay. Rebecca Galoob. Galoob, G-A-L-O-O-B. I am a teacher at the high school. I have children in the school district. And my concern is about the addition of some of the administrative positions that have been proposed. For example, there's a STEMS administrator, science, technology, engineering, math. I'm a science teacher at the high school, and my concern is that monies are being spent towards these administrative positions rather than positions with people that work with children. And from my understanding, these positions would be to evaluate science teachers and shape curriculum. And I would suggest that this work is already being done by those of us that teach and deliver the curriculum. And since we are already highly qualified teachers, that money not be spent towards evaluating us, but rather spent to purchase science equipment for our students to use and to replace things like the classroom desks at the high school that we call low riders because the plastic's broken and they sag until they crack in half. So my concern is just about those new positions being administrative rather than positions with people that work with the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jim?
I mean, just, is there an answer to that? Is there one more administrator, 2 more, dozens more? I mean, just, can there be some feedback on that?
So there are 2 new positions being created. One is an exempt position, not an administrator. We have different classifications. And so the exempt position is a behavioral specialist. The behavioral specialist grew out of a need that arose particularly at the elementary schools. Teachers and administrators brainstorming ways to support teachers and support students that are not necessarily special needs youngsters, but are presenting with significant behavioral concerns. The thought was to hire someone who had a clinical psychologist background, and that in addition to offering that behavioral support, that they could theoretically be in charge of some of the other supports professionals like school psychologists or social workers. The STEM coordinator is an administrative position. STEM means science, technology, engineering, and math. And that grew out of some of the very issues that Mrs. Galoob talked about. One is that the transition to the Common Core state standards and the next generation science standards is going to require some significant curriculum changes, instructional pattern changes, particularly in science and math. But as the next generation science standards are coming forward, we're seeing a strong engineering and technology component as well. And so there is also a need to have someone else come in to help out with the evaluation. The Rhode Island model for evaluation system, I'm sure you've read about it in the newspaper. It significantly impacts the capacity of our current principals. And there is a need, and it's been expressed by some of the science and math specialists that are teachers and department chairs, that it would be nice to have someone who had a science or math background coming in and doing the evaluation.
Okay, so these are the two positions I asked you about earlier?
They are.
Okay, so, and while we're on positions, just so I understand.
Are you moving off this one? Because I wanted to say one other piece.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so as we talked about at one of our earlier town council sessions, at the town council meeting, what would happen is that you can certainly vote to reduce or increase, would be my preference to increase, the school side of the budget. That would be delightful. But then what you're doing is you're not making the decision about which particular items in the budget are impacted by that. So that then would bring back to the school committee decision, and the school committee would get to decide what the priority was, depending upon what your cut was or what your addition was.
Okay, all right, so, but these are new positions?
Yes.
Okay, which brings me to my other question, which I asked the last time, and just because I get phone calls and I can't interfere with your business, but on those three positions that, that three teachers were let go, I think with tenure under 3 years. But my question the last time was, are those positions remaining open? Is there some funding for those positions before you hire someone? Is there anything in the salary account, or they're considered a zero balance going forward for next year?
The salaries for those positions are included in this budget.
All right, so you are planning on hiring 3 folks? I mean, the positions are open, those salaries are in there, so...
The salaries are in there.
All right, so you will be hiring 3 to fill those, so you haven't zeroed that account out?
We have not zeroed that account out. There's no budget reduction intended in that capacity.
Okay.
It's a personnel decision.
Okay, yeah, I'm not getting that, I just wanted to know the money flow. So I didn't know if it was zero here, or whether you included, but you include an entry-level, salary level? Or do you take like a 5th step? What kind of a number do you put in that?
Whenever we have an open position in the budget, we figure for step 3.
Okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
Further comments?
Jonathan Daly LaBelle. A couple questions for the school committee. Do I direct it to you, or? Okay. So I don't know if you want me to, if I can just go one at a time. One of the last meetings, after one of the last meetings, I was on the road, and I just was checking out the playground over at South Road School, where the preschool is being moved over there. And then I went over to Hazard School, and it's a very different scale of equipment. And so I'm just wondering if the school committee has, factored in, it's going to be younger children over at the South Road School, from when it was an elementary school.
Thank you. I think that the superintendent would like to address that. Or John, please.
The actual playground, we looked at the layout at the school and the playground, and have gone with some recommendations that were brought to us by RIDE, and that would be to not use that playground as is, but to move the playground fencing so that we encompass the area in between the school. That would give us partial grass and partial blacktop, and so a variety of manipulatives could be used with the children, and so that's what we're opting for now. So the fenced area would actually be in between the 2 wings of the school, and that playground would not be used for the younger children. That would be maintained for the public.
And we thought about moving the Maddie Saravo Memorial Playground. I'm not sure if you were here at the meeting that we discussed that, Jonathan, but it was felt that it was very well utilized by the community around the high school. The families come and use it all the time, and that moving it, it might not survive the move, and we wouldn't want to do damage to it. Keep in mind, though, that the playground, we had imagined we would have to create an entirely new playground structure at Peacedale when we put the budget that we're in now together. So the budget that we're talking about tonight does not impact that playground site.
Okay, so this information you've provided, you had as you were making, prior to making the decision, or as you were making the decision?
I don't know which decision you mean. So there was a decision to
The
move
decision,
the preschool to...
I'll clarify if you want.
Okay, no, if
Okay.
I can say it back to
Sure.
you, then you can clarify, that would be great. So the decision originally made to move the preschool, we knew that there would have to be a new playground structure built. We assumed that was going to be at Peacedale and budgeted for it. Along the way, as we get closer to now that the preschool is going to South Road, we've had preschool teachers tour the site. We've had people come in from the Rhode Island Department of Education and the Early Childhood Standards Group. Most recently came through, they had just done a site visit with Deb Hopkins and a few of the other preschool teachers at Hazard, and made recommendations to that site and acknowledgments and accolades. So we utilized their talents to take another look at the site that we're moving to now, and so they've made some additional ideas, if you will. So I don't know what decision point you're referring to, but it's like a continually evolving process.
Okay.
As we get closer to the move.
I appreciate that.
John, I think, is struggling for the microphone back.
Well, I just wanted to add too that when we did the tour with RIDE, there is a possibility that there is planning money to help us plan the playground that would be provided out of a grant, and possibly some Race to the Top funds that would assist us with the playground. But RIDE was at that, with that age group of children, was preferring that we use the blacktop area with not so much playground equipment, but more manipulatives for the children, which would be cycles and Hot Wheels and those kinds of things. So we would phase in any of the major equipment, a couple of pieces at a time, and we would be looking for the Race to the Top grant money to help us with that too.
We didn't know about that, so that was a pleasure and a bonus.
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, so I just had a question. I know this doesn't impact this budget year, or at least if I'm understanding the process correctly, it's not impacting this budget year. But I know I hear we talk about looking at the out years as much as possible, so we're not just budgeting year to year. And so I'm just would like to know if it was truly considered, bringing another building online with all the associated maintenance that goes along with that. It being South Road.
Kristen, Dr. Stringfellow.
So the maintenance of the building continually has to be maintained, and we had established a South Road fund to help with that maintenance and offset housing aid loss. That fund is starting to run dry because we had not, for a period of time, had tuitions, had rent. Right now it's being rented to Quest Montessori. We envision that rental agreement staying in place in the near future. They will offset the building usage, the electricity, that will end up being paid for. It is now. And we actually, in moving Hazard folks to South Road, we can apply for housing aid again. Now, that's not a given, but it's an option, and it's something that we'll hopefully receive.
Okay. Yeah, I was, personally, I was a little taken off guard by that, because I kind of thought that I had heard a lot of talk about, what, kind of out in the community, what will happen with South Road School. So I was kind of surprised to see it being reutilized, by the actual school department, for the education of children here, without kind of a larger discussion on, what is going to happen with South Road School. So, and then just Yeah, the last piece, I think that this budget process, I understand this, the budget's been passed, or at least if I'm understanding the process correctly, the budget's been passed, and this is a public hearing. But I think through this whole process, school committee, has the largest portion of the town budget, as has, been reported time and again. And I think that the school committee would be better served to be able to have dialogue with community members at their budget meetings, not just the work sessions, but actually their regular meetings. So I don't know if that has been like a specific change that happened this term, and I don't know if there was ever a vote to have that way of doing business changed. But I'm hoping that for the next budget season, that there'll be a better way to have interaction with the community, because when people come up to the microphone and there's no response, it really discourages people, and it kind of sets off a tone that you have all the answers and there's no answers from within the community. It's not very welcoming, and I don't think you end up with the best process that's available. So I hope that's looked at. I know one of the last meetings I was at, I was told that we get it. Jonathan, we get it, but I hope that you do get it. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. As far as dialogue with the school committee in reference to the budget, we do have part of the planning process for the whole budget. We've had dates where we've worked together. March 14th, I believe, was one of those. And that's actually one of the, purposes of this meeting tonight. So I think there may not be every single school committee meeting that they take comments with the budget from the public, but I think that we do have built into our process to address that. Tony, and then Maureen, and we'll go Maureen first.
Well, I would just make a comment that we certainly have a very robust budget process in this town. I mean, it begins in December with a meeting here and follows with subsequent meetings, including this public hearing. And the school committee also holds work sessions where the public is very much invited to engage in the conversation. And certainly when we have a vote on the budget, the public has the right to come up to the microphone and weigh in at that particular time. So again, I think that the school committee and the town council both engage in a very, very robust budget discussion.
Tony?
Thank you. When we discussed the STEM coordinator approximately 2 months ago, I did not vote in favor of that position, although my thoughts have now evolved in regards to this position. My initial perception was that it was a position that was being implemented really to oversee an evaluation system that I felt we did not have yet enough experience or feedback with. But as my understanding has grown, that it is primarily going to be utilized to develop new curriculum within the areas that it represents in the acronym, I fully support it. To think that we're doing well in science would be a terrible misnomer. I think we have excellent science teachers. I think not only our school system, but as we look at our nation's school systems and how they evolve scientists, we are coming up dramatically short compared to where the rest of the world stands. So I too am a science teacher and also a writer of science curriculum. I think teachers have influence on curriculum. They give information that's important to administrators to develop curriculum, and I think they're responsible for one of the greatest roles, which is to implement and teach curriculum. But I think that's dramatically different to writing curriculum, and I think that requires a certain set of expertise that will be served by a very important administrative position. So that's just my view from the world of science, and I think that it's a position that's really quite needed in this district.
I just have a question for maybe Dr. Stringfellow. And it's stretching really the budget, but seeing that the budget has been referenced to these new positions and evaluations, I believe that there are changes coming down from the Rhode Island Department of Education, and I don't know if you could just briefly elaborate. Are they definite?
Are they, was the question, are they definite?
Are they, is it definitely?
Christine, would you like to help me answer this one? I guess I'll start with the are they definite. We received a piece of paper that was published, I think it's on golocalprov.com and a couple of other places, letting us know what the expected changes are. And I think they took some of the feedback of our teachers and our principals and our superintendents, but I don't know that folks are fully satisfied with the feedback that was taken. My understanding is that the commissioner is coming out and conducting several sessions. She may have even started, I'm not sure, sort of explaining what the first round of changes are. And again, this is from my perspective. Mm-hmm. And that there are still some folks left to weigh in. I know that the Association of Principals and the Association of Superintendents, in addition to the feedback mechanism that RIDE created for us to respond to, created our own feedback mechanism, and she was just receiving that data as she was rolling out the changes. I'm speaking of Commissioner Gist, what she said to the RISA board is that she would certainly still consider further changes. But I don't know how realistic that is, because we're already programmed in for I have 6 full days this summer for myself for training on some of the new changes, 4 on teacher and 2 on administrator. So some of the changes have to do with the number of student learning objectives. Some of the changes have to do with paperwork. There is some talk about creating computerized systems for us to keep track of the data. So to give you just an idea, I use an entire legal pad when I'm doing a long observation of one principal. I'm visiting, 35 to 50 classrooms, if there are 35 to 50 classrooms. And by classrooms, I mean small group settings and large group settings. And so that would be helpful, putting it online and having some sort of a quicker mechanism would be helpful. But I don't know that we know that the changes that were shared out are permanent changes yet. I think by the summer, by our first training, then we'll know what's permanent changes. There are some reductions in work, but it's going to be countered by different pieces. So a couple of the things that will counter it. We're realizing at a state level that there will be more people online. So we haven't yet started evaluating school psychologists, social workers, school nurse teachers, guidance counselors. They'll come online presumably next year or the year after. And we're also not able to yet cycle out the teachers who have become proficient. So that was a part of the original design, that when a teacher is proficient, presumably they're not going to get less proficient, and so they're going to cycle out to every 2 or 3 years. We won't see that next year. So there will be changes.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions from the audience? Hello.
Hi, I'm June Kinnickstein. I'm a science teacher at the high school. I teach with Becky Galoob. And I also want to speak about the STEMS position. First of all, in the last 2 weeks, there has been information in the newspaper and information that's been sent to us that RIDE is streamlining the evaluation process, and that the amount of time that they expect administrators to need for evaluating teachers is going to be reduced. And I'm very concerned because the curriculum that we're talking about we're now going to be using is called the Common Core curriculum. That's already been written. It's not something that a new person is going to be writing. It has been written. The science chairperson at the high school has reviewed it. She described it as being extremely similar to what we are currently teaching. The curriculum has changed 3 times in the last 12 years. We're currently using the GS grade span expectations. We're now going to be switching over to the Common Core. And the teachers have always been the people who are responsible for making the changes that are necessary. And why do I care about this position? I care about this position because as a teacher, I'm given less than $3 per child to perform the labs and the activities that we do in the classroom. So when I hear people talking about engineering and technology and the funding of positions for over 6 figures, and teachers are being given $3, that's how much money we have, I ask myself, is this what I want to be paying for as a taxpayer? Is this what people in this town think the money in the science department is being spent on? For somebody to come and evaluate the teachers rather than providing the money to the teachers so that we can actually do hands-on things in the class? I think it's poorly spent money.
Dale, did you get June, I'm sorry, but could you?
Kinisting.
Kinestein.
K-I-N.
Thank you. Any other further comments from the audience? At this time, we will continue. Thank you.
Okay, on the next page is we're going to deal with the 2 special revenue funds. PCL office building, each of these are operated without any type of property tax support other than if it's referenced, such as our seniors program. PCL office building, we're looking at approximately $1,600 increase. The program revenues are coming either from the programs that are operated at the site or the rental income. Right now, there are 9 different units that pay month rents to be located in the detail office building. That's generating about $78,000 a year. The different programs that are being run there generate another $14,800, and undesignated fund balance is added to the house. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the guild. Neighborhood Guild is also a special revenue fund. There is no dollars from property tax or general fund transfers that go to the guild. A major portion of the guild revenues comes from the trust funds that are held for a specific operation of that facility. What we attempt to do is to pay for the administrative costs and the overhead associated with the operation of the building with funds from the endowment. We're expecting between endowment funds as well as hazard trust funds and reinvested income from endowment funds, about $435,000 with the administrative cost of fuels, heat, light, electric, as well as the staffing for the guild is looking at a cost of $441,000. So we're just about being able to cover what the costs are net of the debt service requirements. Right now, we are looking at on the capital budget another $1 million will go out in 2014 for additional improvements at the guild facility. At that time, the last 20-year bond for the guild will have been paid off. So we're looking at an overall program budget of about $836,000 with really the revenues that are coming in from the programs, $372,000 in revenue are from program users to be able to use the music program, the programs, and so forth. On the senior services program, that program also operates as a special revenue fund. But different from the guild or from PCL office building, there is a property tax transfer of $351,498, which is about a $10,000 increase over what the current year appropriation was to be transferred to balance this program. The seniors program does operate 4 different we have to account for the program service and ensure that the user fees are generating the necessary funds to be able to accommodate full costs associated with the community program. With the Water Enterprise Fund, we're looking at a budget next year of approximately $1 million, $995,000, so about 3.2%. The major cost that we're seeing is cost of transportation, as far as vehicle operations, increase of about $6,000 in retirement transportation is about $3,000, and the cost of water purchase is up about $20,000. Southfield Water System and Middlebury Water Systems are the two town water systems that operate through the enterprise fund. All water was purchased through United Water. United Water was just completed a rate review and has received a substantial rate increase from the Public Utilities Commission. Therefore, the wholesale water that we purchased through them, we're anticipating the price of approximately $20,000 more than in the current year. To accommodate the increase in cost of operation, up from $964,000, we will be forecasting a rate increase going from $175 for the first 5,000 cubic feet of water to $178, a $3 unit price increase. Any of the additional units, these are units that would be off of a main line going in, such as the dairy property and was, are going from $75 per unit up to $77. We'll also see an increase in the cost on excess water purchase. We'll be going up from $2.91 to $2.97 per 100 cubic feet of water. It's interesting to note that of that $1 million budget, almost 22.5% of it is being paid for through revenues generated from cell towers. So when we look at that industry and we look at the overall cost of the program, the rates for water service would be substantially higher were it not for those third-party revenues available. Obviously, the infrastructure is responsible for allowing those rentals to occur, and it pays down a certain portion of the water budget. If there's no questions on wastewater, wastewater is a $3.24 million program for next year. This is not all associated with South Kingston. The wastewater program is operated on behalf of the University of Rhode Island and for a certain portion, about 60% of Narragansett. As you can see in the revenue structure associated with the program, contributions from the town of Narragansett in the amount of $706,000, and the university another $600,000 or $505,000 are a portion of the $3.2 million that we're spending. Just as with the water utility, we'll be seeing a minimal increase in rates for the 2012-2013 year for balance of budget. We'll be seeing a $225 unit cost per year for 10,000 cubic feet of water use, going up to $229 or $4. You'll see the cost for excess use over 10,000 cubic feet go from $2.85 to $2.90 per 100 cubic feet. So again, minimal increases. One of the other points that I would make in reference to the enterprise funds is that as an enterprise fund, we also charge as an annual expense for depreciation. So when we look at the water fund, while the water fund is at a $995,000 budget, $183,000 of that is expensing the capital equipment and facilities that are component of our plan. Theoretically, once we have depreciated all the equipment and items that are in use, we would have the reserve balance available to rebuild the system without capital investments in terms of volume we require. Wastewater program, based on accounting standards, has to have depreciation recognized as well as South Kingstown's portion of the wastewater system. That's an expense anticipated around $345,000 in the budget stage itself. This year, we're looking at about a $50,000 reduction in the cost of facilities associated with 2013 year into the capital construction fund that would then deal with the track program. Number 3 is the dollars associated with impact fees that need to be brought in as a revenue to the general fund. So too is number 4, same thing with the transfer of impact fees associated with the cost of recreation projects. The 5th is also revenue associated, which is the transfer from the open space reserve fund into the general fund. The 6th is the money that is transferred out of the trust fund for the Neighborhood Guild, and those are all part of the budget revenue statement for the 12-13 year. Number 7 is the utility and special fund. These are all the revenues because the general fund provides services on behalf of all of the different programs. What we do is we backfill the administrative expenses associated with payroll, audit, accounting, those types of things. So the water fund would be paying $20,000 in revenue into the general fund to pay down those costs, and so forth. Number 6 is the transfer associated with the school fund transfer. This is for the general fund to transfer the $48 million from the general fund, as well as for us to transfer the money to the senior program, which I've already mentioned, and the wastewater fund, the 9,200. The 9,200 transfer there is because we have an employee within the wastewater program that provides services for ISDS. So since ISDS systems are not paying any user fees, we have to offset that cost in general revenues developed within the general fund itself. Moving on, the last 2 million 10 are transfers for retirement vacation reimbursement requirements. These would be paid out of the compensated absences fund, which is also maintained to be able to recognize what the cost will be as people leave the town for accrued vacation and sick leave that they can have in place. So that is really a general summary of what's within your warrant document. We will hold the same public hearing tomorrow night, and for those that really want to hear me say exactly the same thing at the same time, I want to all be back. They talk about robust discussion. I was concerned somebody would say it was robust. Verbose discussion. If there is any other questions, I would like to try to answer them.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions here at the table before I go back out to the public? Comments, questions? Okay, I'm sorry, Jim?
Yeah, Steve, back to the beginning, the automobile issue. You mentioned 16 cents was a possibility, 680,000 with a 20% reduction, 25% reduction?
When we put the budget message together, we used 20%. I updated that here because what we're looking at is that, as we get closer to certifying the goal, we're seeing that there was a larger increase in motor vehicles. And I think when we put my budget together, it was under about 10 million. It's now forecasted about 12 million. So yeah, the 680 would be if there was a 20% loss in taxable value associated with the motor vehicles.
Right. There seemed to be a little momentum with that 6-year rule at the General Assembly. Have you done any of the arithmetic on that?
If I had to bet at this time, I don't think it'll affect the 12-13 year. I think that if they do make the changes, it would be most pragmatic on their part to place it into effect for the 13-14 year to provide municipalities with the opportunity to prepare their budgets appropriately. But then to make those type of changes now, where most cities and towns have already adopted budgets or are in the process of adopting budgets, make it most difficult.
Yeah.
Same holds true, Jim, on, I think that we've seen the builders come in with this building permit reduction and in fact the reduction in past years. I would be hopeful that those would not occur, but we would have
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments here at the table before I go back to the public? So this is your last chance if somebody would like to make any final comments.
Jonathan Daly LaBelle. I think that the two teachers that spoke, especially the second one that came up, raised some very strong points, and I think that speaks to there's a problem with the process and there's a problem with the representation. Too many times, people do not feel welcome and that they're not invited in, and we don't get both sides of the story. And I think it leaves an impression out in the community that the elected officials and administrative officials really just bring in one side of the story. So they come up with something that they want to do, and then they bring in that side to help push that through. And I think we've been seeing that pretty consistently for a few years. And I think if it was having an honest, open dialogue and discussion, then the contrary point of view would be brought in the early stages. Right now it would take a Congress to undo what's already been done. So it needs to be earlier in the process to have both sides aired so that the best decision can be made. And I think that this has an impact on the budget, and it has an impact on the program. And I hope that the way these processes are run will be looked at a little more thoroughly in a public meeting. Say, how can we do this to get the best results? Thank you.
Dr. Stringfellow.
So just to clarify, there were certainly many thought-provoking discussions that led up even to the point of my recommending to the school committee that those two positions be created. Several meetings over several years regarding the behavioral specialist and trying to design some sort of support structure. That request came from buildings. It came from teachers and parents that were concerned. In terms of the STEM coordinator, there were discussions certainly with teachers, and there was a joint meeting, actually, that was requested by the union leadership, which was a fabulous idea. I mentioned this publicly, that we sit down with the leaders in the science department, the math departments, the middle school science and math department chairs, to get their perspective about this work. And at those meetings, this type of conversation was not heard. I want to talk a little bit about, because it was a little surprising to me to hear about the broken desks and the lack of science materials. And certainly, I would like to bring that to the attention of the science department chair, Mr. McCarthy, because you need to understand what our budget process looks like at the school level. We have P accounts. Those P accounts are not under the direction of anyone at this table. Certainly what ends up happening is that the principal gets a per pupil amount and uses it in a way that will be most beneficial for his or her school population. At the high school, that means that the department chair have a significant role in that design. One of the things that we noticed this year is that since our P accounts have been, in the past, reduced, this year they were reduced but increased but reduced by enrollment, I noticed that there weren't enough leveled readers in some of the elementary schools and the middle schools. And that's a conversation that we're having with principals so that we can infuse money in that direction. So if there is indeed some sort of an issue with desks, I don't know about it. And if there's an issue with science materials, I don't know about it. So we would certainly, if there is a concern, we would try to direct money there.
Thank you. Did I see another hand? Tony?
I would first echo Kristen's comments about the importance of adequate supplies, and certainly through this process, this is the first time that this has been brought out publicly. I think there's been plenty of opportunity for discussion. I think there's been a lot of open discussion, and I know that when we had a vibrant meeting in regards to these two positions that went on for a lengthy period of time, and ultimately led to an approval with a 5-2 vote. I would also state that I don't think any member of the school committee ever behaves in a robotic group speak fashion. I think we have had, through my tenure of 8 years, lengthy meetings with long discussions, sending policies back for multiple revisions, and then this superintendent in particular has been incredibly generous with her time, explaining to individuals in the public, individual school committee members, rationales behind her recommendations. I can't imagine anyone who has been more given to her district and her community in regards to her time in this matter. So I see it much differently than the member of the community just pointed out.
Thank you. Any other comments? At this time, sorry, Jim?
John, an easy one. I've seen all kinds of enrollment numbers at that October 1st last year date. Do you have a preschool number for me and a K through 12 number for me?
We will bring you the exact number tomorrow. I can give it to you off the top of my head, but it's not going to be exact.
No, that won't help me.
I will be seeing you tomorrow. Isn't that lucky?
Last opportunity for the public. Okay. I would just like to thank Stephen Allen, Town Council, School Committee, all the input tonight. We do have the second public hearing tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here in the Town Chambers, and we all look forward to April 30th with adopting a final budget. So, without further ado, we will adjourn. 8:10. Thank you.